Hey all, and welcome back to the home of Layton's Gal, the place where all dignity goes out the window in favor of venting about Layton all day. And today, I am here to do that once again. However, my reasoning for this time around is rather straightforward. On November 8th, the last installment of the Layton series, Layton's Mystery Journey, will be making its way to Switch in the form of a port. Which, in all honesty, for some reason I haven't seen pretty much anyone hardly saying anything about this. I don't know, it could just be me being stupid or not noticing people talking about it, but it could also be just because this isn't something cool like a trilogy or a collection reveal or a brand new game. But you know what? Someone has to mention it, so might as well be me. And as I know, we're all anxious for any reveal of a Layton trilogy or some form of a collection for Switch, like I said before. But still, this will be the series' first ever official release on a home console, so it deserves to be talked about in my eyes. And I guess this could also serve as a useful tool for those who may not have yet played the game on 3DS or iOS and want to try it out. So, in light of all that, I figured I'd do a small review of both the game, and I'll briefly mention the anime, since they basically go hand in hand. And I feel due to certain decisions with the game, it's almost impossible to not mention the anime alongside it, since I truly feel the anime added so much to the story and world that Catriel's game set up, and actually redeemed the few negative aspects of the game. So, let's start off with Layton's mystery journey itself, shall we? To start us off, I want to discuss some of my favorite aspects of the game, and the things that I felt Level 5 did that added to the series in an impactful way. After that, we'll discuss the few negative aspects, which will segue us into discussing the anime briefly. So let's face it, the Layton series is getting rather big. Sure, each game takes about 20 hours, give or take, and that's not too bad. So to play all 6 mainline games, plus the 3 spin-offs, it's not too insane compared to some series. However, I'm someone who maintains the idea that changing things up after a while can be refreshing and add new life to a series to make it feel justified and still going on. And I feel that's one of my favorite aspects of the game that was implemented well. Catriel sort of opened a whole new world within the normal Layton one we've come to know and love. And rather than being just a soulless replacement for Layton, or a character that's meant to take over or be a clone of him, we're given a unique character that's simply added into the story, which I think is great. If you're going to do something like this, adding to the world you've already built up is always a plus over totally changing things or removing them. And I think Catriel is a good method of changing things up a tad, while still keeping the latent feeling alive. And of course, throughout the game, we're given clear evidence that this is indeed the same London we've traveled before, and Layton's presence is established through dialogue. So, besides the initial setup being promising, I'd say the major aspects that make the game on par with the others is the graphics, puzzles, music, and characters. All of these areas have been kept intact, and in my eyes didn't really suffer due to the change in protagonists. The locations are recognizable, and you get to, of course, revisit many locations from the previous games. Puzzles, in my eyes, however, can be subjective, because to me, as far as I remember, I didn't feel like the puzzles were all that at all bad compared to previous titles. I know some people have said to have enjoyed them less. However, I feel this is something totally left to the player to decide for themselves, because I've heard others say the same for many of the previous titles. For every Layton title, there's someone who thinks the puzzles are lacking or too easy, and others who found the game more overall difficult. So on that note, I'd say maybe look up a walkthrough if you're that concerned over the puzzles and take a look at how some of them look. Well, actually, I'll be nice and place some on the screen here for you. Obviously, you won't see the rules for much time, but you're welcome to pause and check some of them out. Also, before we move on, I'll briefly mention the actual game mechanics. Only reason I won't be going on and on here is because if you're used to how you play the late games, like how you navigate the maps, move around and inspect the area, you've pretty much got it down. So, yeah, no complaints from me on that front. If it ain't broken, don't fix it, you know? Anyway, Moving on to the subject of music. As you could expect, maybe, the music definitely wasn't something that suffered either. In fact, there's quite a few remakes and remixes of previous songs thrown in. So I can easily see the music also added to that patented Layton-esque feeling. Finally, the characters. The characters, as per usual Layton standards, are indeed plentiful and enjoyable in my eyes, and have a wide variety, which is of course standard in the Layton series. The characters, especially the main ones, are all enjoyable in my eyes and have a nice dynamic with each other, which again is expected of the series. Catriel has both an assistant, a pet assistant, a rival of sorts, and a friendship with a detective. Ernest, Cheryl, Emiliana, and Hastings, respectively, which all help her at some point throughout the game, or are also working on the same case. Catriel herself is sort of a divide among fans, I suppose. I definitely see more love for her than hate, however, and obviously something like a character's personality is pretty easily left up to the audience to decide whether they enjoy or not, unless it's a character that's entire purpose is to be hated, even though characters like that usually end up being liked by some people too. Well, anyway, I personally have no issue with Catriel's personality, and often find her very enjoyable and funny. She's definitely different from Layton, very different, and I think that's a good thing. It sets her as separate from him, and again, as I said earlier, doesn't just make her seem like a clone or a replacement, because she isn't. She's her own character who simply is related to him. So honestly, it would be a tad annoying if she was exactly like him or even really similar. Her personality is sort of mixed. On one hand, she's definitely kind and caring, adventurous and curious, which could also be traits applied to Layton. However, her overall demeanor is different, and she definitely doesn't mind saying what's in her head, and she also is more boastful than Layton. However, to me this ends up coming across as more funny or lighthearted rather than mean-spirited or that she actually thinks she's better than others or something. I feel like that's probably the vibe most people get from her. The top complaint is, or that I've seen, is that she's rude, but honestly I just don't see it. At no point do I remember myself thinking, wow, Kat sure is an asshole. She's just different. And again, I don't find that to be negative at all. But as I said, that's left to your own perspective, and no one is forced to like a character, of course, that is just more my personal outlook. However, I do think most people could agree it's best that she's very different from Layton himself. Because I think that's a part of how she's managed to catch on relatively easy. She's different and adds something new to the series while not replacing Layton. Because all too often when companies attempt to fully replace a character, it just comes off as forceful or there's some agenda attached to it, and thankfully I didn't feel that at all with this. While it is true that Catriel was added to appeal more to a female audience, at least level 5 respects us enough to not treat us like mindless fools who don't appreciate the great characters who've built up the series. They simply added in this extra layer, and again, Layton himself is not forgotten. Speaking of Layton, let's move on to the final subject, the story. It's sad, but true. The main area of suffering in this title is the story and overall structure of it. Let me start off by saying that the overall idea they had was perfectly fine, but rather it seems the execution of it was off a bit for some reason. Basically, the premise is there, but it wasn't actually taken in depth, which is a shame and doesn't make a ton of sense given level 5's experience. My only explanation for why this may be is that they were testing the waters with a new character and setting, and weren't sure how deep to go with it exactly, and honestly, who knows how far in advance the anime was planned. But the anime sort of fixed any issues I had with the story of the game itself. But before that, I'll explain. In a short, no-spoiler summary, the game introduces Catriel as Layton's daughter, and she runs her own detective agency alongside her friend and assistant Ernest and her newly found talking dog companion Cheryl. The two main story aspects are surrounding the Seven Dragons, which are seven millionaires who live in London that all, in the end, are tied to a conspiracy. The second aspect is that Catriel is looking for her father, Layton. And what's sad is, really neither of these things are all that relevant, and finding Layton basically doesn't happen. Which is confusing in all honesty. Finding Layton is even a bullet point on the back of the box, so why would level 5 basically lie? Sure, Layton has brought it multiple times, and Catriel even brings it up herself multiple times, However, looking for Layton and actually finding him in the game never happens. Now, the conspiracy with the seven millionaires does indeed happen. However, it's done in such a way that doesn't have a ton of build-up. The structure of the game is set in chapters, much like previous titles. However, each chapter is its own case, which, hey, that sounds fine, right? Alfendi's game worked the same exact way, and that game was well received. However, the only problem is that there isn't much of an overarching story. By the end of the chapter, you of course wrap up the case for that chapter, but there isn't much that forms an actual ongoing story. But honestly, I do like the cases. Despite not having some insanely amazing story woven into all the cases, I still enjoyed the individual cases themselves, and there is a decent ending to the game, I'll say that much. It just sadly left me wanting more is all. Which will lead us into our final topic, the anime. Now, like I said, I have no idea when the anime was decided upon. However, due to a scene at the very end of the game, it was evident they were planning something. Whether at the time it was set to be another game, or they actually knew they were going to do the anime is unclear. But the anime is what we got, and I couldn't have been happier with it. In short, what made this show great besides it being a Layton anime is how much it added. Basically, in its 50 episodes, it has three main episode types. Episodes based entirely on the cases from the game, anime original cases, which there's a lot of, and episodes about what happened to Layton, all leading up to them finding him in the end. So basically, this anime set out to do what the game could maybe have done. But honestly, the whole story they built around finding Layton could have been its own game on its own, so. I would tell you more, but honestly, if you aren't spoiled already, or even if you are, I highly suggest just watching it. I had so much fun watching it as it aired over the year it took to air all 50 episodes, and I'd hate to just spoil it all here. All in all, the show is a great blend of Catriel's misadventures and her own stuff, and the more serious story of her finding Layton and seeing what happened to both him and Luke. There's a lot more natural emotion in the show as well, and it really feels more like how the previous games did. So all in all, I do recommend the game of course as well. While it's probably the weaker of the series, I'd probably rank it on the same tier as Curious Village. It's still worth a try, and definitely fun. As I stated, it has a lot going for it that makes it a good entry into the series, and it will be at least fun for most Layton fans, I think. If you just go in knowing you're not getting the same level of story as, say, Unwound Future or the prequel trilogy, I think you could definitely enjoy it and have some fun with it. Also, if anyone out there thinks I'm being way too easy on the game, despite claiming to be a hardcore fan of the series, here's my simple explanation. First off, like we discussed earlier, the game has plenty of elements that make it a good game overall, so that's the first one. Second, the Layton series has been going on since 2007, and in that time we've been given super consistent, well-made games. Two trilogies with intertwining stories, a crossover spin-off, as well as the mobile spin-off Mystery Room, not to mention a movie. So I'm definitely more willing to let this slide, especially since they're trying new things, and trying to keep the series alive and fresh, which is something I could respect. If you just can't get into it, I totally understand. Not everything will be for everyone, and you're of course free to make any conclusion you want regarding if you think this game would be fun for you or not based on what I've said here. If you're at all interested or think it sounds fun, I'd say go for it. I'll be picking it up and replaying it once it comes out, and I'm looking forward to trying it out again, especially after seeing the show. I want to pay close attention and try to pick out all the differences I could spot. Oh, before I go, not that I'm sponsored or anything, of course, but I want to mention that the game will be $40 like it was for the 3DS, which I think is great. So if you've never played this, I highly suggest just going with this version since it won't have DLC either. All the outfits for Catriel that were DLC in the original will just be included this time around, so definitely a bonus, and I'm very glad that they're just keeping it at the same price that it was on 3DS and not increasing it. So, let me know. Are you going to be picking up the game sometime soon? And do you think that a Layton collection is on the horizon? Because I definitely do. Also, I don't know how to end this video, so please remember to hit the donate button in the lower left to donate your life savings so we can give it to the almighty Sakurai so we can get Layton and Smash. It's a small price to pay, in all honesty. Thank you for listening to this important PSA, and I'll see you all later. Bye, yo.